You know, there's something rather curious happening to you, isn't it? You've learned all the techniques, the confidence tricks, the conversation starters, the way to stand, the right things to say. Yet somehow, when she has options, you're still not the one chosen. And here's what's peculiar. The problem isn't that you're doing something wrong. The problem is that you're doing everything right. You're playing a game that everyone else plays, and my friends, that's precisely why you're losing. What if I told you the answer isn't addition, but subtraction? It's like trying to tune into a radio frequency that most people have forgotten exists. Everyone else is broadcasting on the same predictable wavelength. The frequency of trying, of proving, of performing masculinity like it's a theater production. And women, they're exhausted from hearing the same static-filled signal over and over again. But you see, you have the capacity to broadcast on an entirely different frequency. Not louder, not more clever, just different. Like a migratory bird that knows true north without a compass, you can navigate by something more ancient than modern dating advice. The other men are like domesticated animals in a zoo, performing tricks for treats. But what calls to something deep within her is the scent of something wild, something that hasn't been tamed by society's expectations of what a man should be. Now, this isn't about superiority, my friends. Let me be quite clear about that. This isn't some manifesto declaring you're better than other men or that you've reached some elevated state of masculine enlightenment. That very thought would trap you in the same ego game we're trying to transcend. No, this is about awareness. It's about seeing the water you've been swimming in your entire life. Most fish don't know they're wet, do they? And here's the thing. Once you see it, you can't unsee. Once you recognize the patterns, the scripts, the elaborate social theater we all participate in, you can't simply go back to performing with the same unconscious enthusiasm. You become, in a sense, aware of your own awareness. And that awareness, that simple recognition of what's actually happening beneath the surface conversations and dating rituals, that's what makes you different. Not superior, different. Like a person who's learned to see in the dark while others are still fumbling for light switches. Most relationships, you see, are shared delusions. They're mutual hypnosis sessions where both parties agree to believe the same comforting lies. We agree that Monday is dreadful and Friday is salvation. We agree that success means a certain salary, a certain car, a certain postal code. We agree that happiness comes from finding the one who completes us as if we were born incomplete, like puzzles missing pieces. We agree that love means constant availability, that connection requires constant communication, that a man should always know what to say. These are the rules of the game. And my friends, here's what happens when you wake up from this collective trance. You see through it. You see the performance for what it is. When she tests you to see if you react with jealousy, you recognize it's not actually about jealousy at all. It's about fear. When she talks about other men having their lives together, you hear the real question underneath. Are you real, or are you just another actor playing the part? When the dating advice tells you to wait 3 days before texting, you see it's just another rule in a game that has no winners, only exhausted players. But here's the rather uncomfortable truth. Once you see through the hypnosis, you can't participate in it with the same enthusiasm. You become like an audience member who spotted the strings holding up the puppets. The magic show loses its magic, and this creates a peculiar problem, doesn't it? Because she's still in the theater, still watching the show, still expecting the performance. She wants the flowers at the right time, the texts with the right frequency, the confidence without arrogance, the attention without neediness. She wants you to play the game perfectly. But you can't, not anymore. You've seen that the game itself is the problem. The constant positioning, the strategic unavailability, the manufactured mystery. It's all just fear wearing different costumes. And quite honestly, you're tired of it. You're tired of the performance. You're tired of calculating the right moment to reveal vulnerability or the precise amount of interest that seems neither desperate nor distant. Let me give you some examples of what this looks like in practice, my friends. Your friend complains endlessly about his boss, the micromanagement, the unfair treatment, the lack of recognition. Everyone else nods sympathetically, agrees the boss is terrible, suggests he update his resume. But you see something different, don't you? You see, it's not actually about the boss at all. It's about his resistance to what is. He's fighting with reality, and reality always wins. The boss exists, behaves exactly as bosses behave, and the suffering comes not from the situation, but from the constant mental argument with it. You see this clearly, like watching someone punch a wall and blame the wall for hurting their fist. A colleague is obsessed with the next promotion. Every conversation loops back to it. Who's ahead? Who's behind? What strategies might work? What the senior partners are thinking. The other men engage in this conversation as if it matters, as if the promotion is the answer to some unspoken question. But you see the truth beneath the ambition. There's an inner emptiness he's trying to fill with external validation. The promotion won't fill it. Nothing external ever does. You've seen this pattern before, like watching waves crash endlessly against the shore, each one certain it will finally change the shape of the land. Your neighbor buys an expensive car and finds ways to mention it in every conversation. The engine, the features, the admiring looks it gets. Everyone congratulates him, asks questions, plays along with the unspoken script. But you see what's really happening? His ego is proving its own existence through the car. Without the external markers of success, he fears he might disappear entirely, like a tree falling in the forest with no one to hear. You recognize this because you felt it yourself, this terror of insignificance that drives men to accumulate trophies. A date talks endlessly about her ex, how terrible he was, how much better she deserves. The conventional wisdom says this is a red flag, that she's not over him, that you should run. But you see something deeper. She's not talking about him at all. She's asking if you'll be different. She's asking if you're awake or asleep. She's asking if you're just another man playing the same tired role. You see the fear beneath the words, like seeing the roots of a tree that explain why it grows in peculiar directions. Another woman tests you with sudden distance, pulling back without explanation. The pickup artists call this a shit test and offer clever strategies to pass. But you see, it's not a test at all. It's a question. She's asking, are you centered in yourself, or does your emotional state depend on my approval? She's asking because every other man has failed this question, his mood rising and falling like a boat on the ocean of her attention, tossed about by waves he doesn't control. You see these patterns everywhere now. You see, and here's what happens, my friends. You lose your taste for pretense. You simply can't fake the laugh anymore when someone tells a joke that isn't funny. The muscles won't cooperate. You can't engage in small talk about weather and weekend plans with the same enthusiasm you once manufactured. The words feel like sand in your mouth. You stop playing the social games that once seemed so important. The strategic positioning, the careful image management, the performance of having it all together. At parties, you find yourself growing quiet, not shy, not anxious, just quiet. Because the conversations are like vinyl records stuck in the same groove, playing the same songs about mortgages and traffic and whether the local football team will win. And you can't help but wonder, is this it? Is this what we've reduced human connection to? Like birds in cages, discussing the quality of their seeds, having forgotten entirely that they once flew. You stop pretending to care about things you don't care about. You stop nodding along with opinions you disagree with. You stop molding yourself into shapes that might please her, might impress her, might make her choose you. And quite honestly, this makes you terrible at modern dating. Because modern dating is precisely about these performances, isn't it? It's about being interesting enough but not too intense. Available enough but not too eager. Confident enough but not arrogant. It's an impossible tightrope walk across a canyon of rejection, but you've stepped off the tightrope. You've realized something rather profound. You'd rather fall as yourself than succeed as someone else. The authenticity isn't even a choice anymore. It's what remains when the pretense becomes unbearable. Like a snake shedding skin that no longer fits, you've outgrown the costume of who you thought you should be. And this, my friends, this is where it gets interesting. Because while you're becoming terrible at the game, you're becoming extraordinary at something else entirely. You're becoming real. And reality, true reality, has a magnetic quality that performance never possessed. It's like the difference between a photograph of the ocean and standing before the actual sea. There's no comparison in the depth of the experience. They chase goals. You see them running on their treadmills, breathing hard, going nowhere, convinced the next milestone will bring the peace they seek. The promotion, the salary, the marriage, the house, the children, the retirement. a chain of future moments when happiness will finally arrive. But you've realized something that cannot be unrealized. Happiness isn't at the end of the road. It is the road itself, or it's nowhere at all. You've noticed, haven't you, that every achievement brings a brief satisfaction followed quickly by the question, what's next? Like climbing a mountain only to discover another mountain behind it, stretching infinitely into the distance. The game has no winning condition. It only has a playing. And this creates a peculiar gap between you and others. When they ask what your goals are, what you're working toward, where you see yourself in 5 years, these questions that once seemed so important now feel like asking which direction you're swimming in the ocean. You're not swimming anywhere. You're floating. You're here. The concept of somewhere else, some better future moment has lost its grip on you like a rope that's finally been untied. She asks what your ambitions are, what drives you, what you're passionate about. And my friends, here's where most men fumble because they haven't quite grasped what she's actually asking. She's not asking about your career trajectory or your financial goals. She's asking if you're alive. She's asking if you're awake. She's asking if you found something worth being here for. Or if you're just sleepwalking through existence like everyone else she's met. The paradox, you see, is that in releasing the desperate pursuit of purpose, you found something more stable than purpose. Presence, you're not trying to become something. You're not trying to get somewhere. You're already here, already whole, ready enough. This isn't resignation or laziness. Quite the contrary. It's the end of the exhausting war with this present moment. This constant feeling that you should be somewhere other than where you are. And when she's with you, she feels the absence of that grasping energy that most men carry like a heavy backpack. She feels like she can finally exhale. You see, she's tired too. She's tired of being the finish line in men's races toward completeness. You've died, my friends. Oh, not physically, of course. But psychologically, there's been a death. The person you thought you were, the collection of achievements and failures, the narrative of I am someone who, the entire autobiography you've been writing since childhood. You've seen through it. You've recognized that your personality is a costume, not yourself. Like an actor who's worn the same role so long he forgot he was acting. You've remembered you're not the character. You're the awareness watching the character perform. This realization brings a rather uncomfortable aloneness. Not loneliness, that's different entirely. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. This aloneness is recognizing that even in connection, even in the deepest intimacy, there's a part of you that remains fundamentally alone. The part that watches, that's aware, that experiences, that can never fully merge with another. Like two waves on the ocean, believing they're separate, then realizing they're both the same water, yet still arising in different forms. The other men are still building their egos, still collecting evidence of their worth, still constructing elaborate identities from their jobs and possessions and relationships. They wear their girlfriends like badges, proving their value. They speak about their partners as achievements, as proof that they're worthy, lovable, successful. I'm the kind of man who has a beautiful woman, their behavior announces. See, I've won. But you've lost interest in this game. Not because you're above it. That would just be ego wearing a spiritual costume. You've lost interest because you've seen that the ego is like a child building sandcastles as the tide comes in. Beautiful, perhaps. Elaborate, certainly, but ultimately temporary, destined to dissolve back into the beach from which it came. And here's the curious thing, this ego death, this psychological dying, it makes you strangely more attractive, doesn't it? Because you're no longer trying to extract validation from her. You're not using her to prove your worth to yourself or the world. She can feel this, she can feel that she's not being consumed, not being used as a mirror for your ego. With you, she can just be like a river that's finally reached the sea and no longer has to push forward. The pressure is off. Solitude, you've discovered, isn't the opposite of connection. It's the foundation. You can be lonely in a crowded room, surrounded by people engaged in conversation, and feel utterly isolated. And you can be alone in a forest with nothing but trees and birdsong, and feel completely connected to everything. The paradox resolves when you realize that loneliness and solitude are not about the presence or absence of others. They're about your relationship with your own presence. You've learned to be alone without being lonely. You've learned, quite honestly, to enjoy your own company, to find the silence nourishing rather than threatening. Most people flee from solitude like it's a prison sentence. They fill every moment with noise, with screens, with activities, with other people, anything to avoid being alone with themselves. Because alone with themselves, they meet someone they don't particularly like. The inner critic, the unfulfilled dreams, the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. But you've made peace with yourself. Like learning to swim, you've stopped fighting the water and discovered it holds you up. And from this foundation of solitude, of being genuinely comfortable in your own presence, connection becomes possible. Real connection, not the desperate grasping that masquerades as intimacy. When you meet her from wholeness, not from neediness. You're not looking for her to complete you because you've realized completion isn't about finding missing pieces. It's about recognizing you were never incomplete. She feels this. She feels like she can choose you without you collapsing into her, without you making her responsible for your emotional state, your happiness, your sense of worth. You're never alone, my friends. Not really. You're the universe experiencing itself through these particular eyes in this particular moment. Your isolation is not a bug in the system. It's awakening. Every moment you felt separate. Every moment you felt like you're operating on a different frequency than everyone else. Every moment you felt like you can't play the games anymore. These aren't signs of failure. They're signs you're waking up. The ocean is not lonely for the wave. The wave is the ocean temporarily taking this particular form, and you are consciousness temporarily taking the form of a person who wonders why she doesn't choose you. But here's the secret. When you stop needing to be chosen, when you release the grasping, when you stand firmly rooted in your own presence like an ancient oak that's weathered 1,000 storms, something shifts. You become unchosen and unchoosable, ungraspable and uncontrollable. And paradoxically, magnetically, beautifully, this is what calls to her most deeply. The person who needs nothing is capable of everything. So I'll leave you with this question, my friends. Oh, what would happen if you stopped trying to make her choose you? What if you simply became so genuinely yourself, so rooted in presence, so comfortable in your own solitude, that her choice became irrelevant to your sense of being? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment.